We're into the second show of the day. Make sure that you check out the first one if you have not already. But this one's going to be a little bit more special than me sitting out on my front porch, and that's because we're bringing in the man who was on the call for the spring game for the Wolverines. It's Captain America himself, Jake Butt, right here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, part two. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. We have the Mackey Award-winning tight end, Jake Butt, here. He's the color commentator for Big Ten Network, the premier color commentator for Big Ten Network. And he is back to talk about the spring game because he was up there calling it. And Jake, excited to have you back, man.
Are you sure you don't want to talk about it's an exciting time to be a Michigan tight end? You don't want to talk about Michigan tight ends. Colston Loveland, number 10, picked the Chicago Bears. This is an insane stat for you, Isaiah. Maybe we can find a way to segue this into the spring game. This blew my mind when I heard it, and it needs to change. Colston Loveland. It's been 2 decades since Michigan has had a non-quarterback offensive skill position player drafted in the first round. Braylon Edwards was the last offensive skill position from Michigan to be drafted in the first round. Gotta change that. Gotta change that.
If you weren't so unselfish and if you would not have come back for your senior year, or if you would have just, been like, you know what, guys, I'm gonna sit out. I don't need to play in this bowl game. I got to get my money. You would have been first. So,
or if I think we were talking about athletic tight ends, or if I was actually athletic, I could have just hurdled the guy from Florida State. But instead, I tried to lower my shoulder, and he just went lower than me and torpedoed my knee. So there's a few options, but I'm happy for Colston. He deserves it. I don't think I would have been the 10th pick in the NFL draft either, by the way. Maybe not even first round. Colston is a stud, though.
You were mocked to the first round for 2 straight years, so you would have been.
By Mel Kiper, but I don't know. Everyone's up in the air on Mel Kiper's draft analysis these days.
Yeah, true. All right. Anyway. So let's talk spring game. Since you don't, I can tell you don't want to talk about Deacon Tonielli. That's where I was going to go next. But which, come on, dude, step up, man. I want to use a 4-star. I want to see him do something. So I rewatched the spring game on Sunday because I had the pleasure of, I don't even think I told you this. I had the pleasure of having cellulitis. So I did not go to church, which is 11 a.m. is exactly when I would be at church. And I did not go because I had a swollen face and a fever and all of that stuff. And I'm rewatching the game. And there were some things that we talked after the game, and I was a little bit more impressed with some of the position groups, but you've only seen it the one time with your eyes as you were speaking and everything. But before we get to maybe some differences from where we were, I just want to get your general opinion. What did you think watching Michigan in the spring game? What were your big takeaways?
Okay, my first big takeaway, and it was selfish. I was thinking about myself. I was like, man, was that a great game? And then I thought back to some of the games I've called, and it's not like a whole lot happened in that game. You know what I mean? So then I was thinking about it, and I was so excited to see Bryce. And as you can see, I started to unpack this. And what is there to take away from a spring game? Like, if there is, it's very little, okay? Like, you have to take all this with a grain of salt. And you and I have talked about this. I put more value into what I've heard from the 14 practices prior than one spring game where the team is split in 2 and all that good stuff. So I think my takeaways were, I think the first thing that stands out, running backs are in a really good spot. And since the game, Michigan has added more depth to that room. And off of that, the offensive line seems to have taken a stride, both, in depth and high quality play, because the defensive line is extremely talented. I think those were the position groups that came to mind right away. And I say, okay, those are healthy spots for Michigan's offense. Great to see McCauley. Hey, 1 for 1. And that was not an easy catch, but it was a great ball, great location. That's hopefully for Michigan fans a preview of what's to come in the fall. And then I'd say the secondary made some plays. There were some young guys that stepped up. There was guys that were in great position. So overall, like those are things that I think everything I just said, you can say is valuable to take away from a spring game. But I'm not going to evaluate Bryce Underwood's potential based on the spring game, considering who was calling plays and who he was throwing.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned those two groups, because in the show that I did earlier today, I talked about evaluating what we saw mixed with what they're going up against, right? So you talk about the offensive line. And yes, there were some lapses. Mostly it seemed like they were from players that if we see them this year, that means something probably went horribly, horribly wrong, because they're second, third on the depth chart. But they're going up against the Michigan defensive front, right? So it's like, okay, that's already a challenge in and of itself to overcome. And I felt like I looked around and saw some guys like Evan Link, who, I've talked about this. I want to see him like this and not like this, and, for those listening, that I'm doing vertical versus horizontal, emulating Silicon Valley. But it's like, I thought that he held his own, right? Like, I didn't think that there was anything egregious upon the rewatch in particular, where it was like, oh man, come on, that looks like week 4 last year. I felt like watching, I'm like, okay, you're working with something here. On the other side, though, you have that secondary, and I did think that they looked good, but they're going up against the Michigan wide receiving core, which is kind of hard to analyze.
Good point.
So, was there anything that surprised you about this game, calling it? Is there anything that you saw and you were like, whether it was positive or negative, was there anything that you took away that was just like, yeah, I don't know about that, or anything that you were like, oh, heck yeah, I'm booking my trip to, I don't know where the championship game is this year, but wherever it might be, Wichita. No, it's not. Was there anything that you took away from that you were like, heck yeah, or, oh man, this is going to take some work?
Okay, so when you ask that question, the first thing that comes to mind is just the offensive play calling, like the willingness to push the ball down the field. And I like that those plays are being called, even if they didn't connect. Because I believe when you're at full force, those plays are going to connect. But last year, it just felt like Michigan's offense everything happened within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. It was honestly suffocating to watch. And now you get to the spring game and say, oh, wow, these are plays that they've been working on, that they've been practicing and executing to the point where they've kept them in the playbook. I know they didn't execute in the spring game. That's probably the first thing that stands out, because it's so critical to their success. I'd go back to the offensive line, and it's a great point, because depth is not equal, which is, hey, if you're talking about whoever it was up front on the offensive line that might have struggled on any given rep. The problem is Michigan's third unit offensive line is different than Michigan's third unit defensive line. Michigan's third unit defensive line, they would start at a lot of schools, a number of those players, particularly on the inside. So the context there matters. A couple guys jumped out. Is it number 32, Lowe? The defensive back had a phenomenal spring game. I mean, he was everywhere and in great position on a number of occasions. And I know, talking to Wink Martindale, that the secondary is an area that needs to be developed. And I thought he, regardless of who he was covering, was in position, got his eyes around, and made plays. I'm not saying what I'm about to say, but Mikey Sainristil, the first spring game he had when he was playing in nickel, he looked like that. They got the same body size, so hopefully that can continue to develop. But maybe the surprise, Isaiah, is I was shocked that Michigan added a couple running backs in the transfer portal, considering how the running back did look in that game. I was shocked to see them going out to add 2 guys. But aside from that, I think a lot of it was pretty much expected for spring game.
Yeah, I feel like Bryson Kuzdal had to be hanging his head come Sunday after the second one.
He had
comes
a
through.
great game, didn't he?
I mean, he showed you a little bit of everything. He showed ability to make people miss. He was hard to take down, had great balance, had great vision, had everything you want.
Good speed.
Yeah.
Had you been hearing anything about him? Like, obviously, no one had mentioned his name. And that's yeah.
It's like the same thing as like Harbaugh talking about like Andrighetto. I can't even remember which one, Nico or Lucas. I don't remember which one was the running back, but it would be like, oh, you got to watch out for Andrighetto. Like this was, I think, 2 years after you. And it was like, it kind of the same thing as like, you almost like get it kind of like the same way as like Peyton O'Leary before the spring.
Yes.
It's like, we're really going to look out for this guy. And then he has a good spring game. You're like, oh, maybe it is a guy. And then you'll just never see him. All right.
How about Hoffman though? How about, because Hoffman made a bunch of plays, but people have mentioned his name and we've seen him on social media clips. Do you think there's anything there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there's no question that Hoffman's going to, because I mean, that's part of the tight end room and they don't have a lot of proven receivers there. And so I think what we saw, especially because I mean, that was all through the receiving game. And I think that shows you just how pivotal he could be. And then the speed on the final play to outrun, granted, not a knock out to the dad out there, Shamari Stone Sr., but like it was Shamari Stone in pursuit and he was trying to get there and couldn't, but like that was the speed thing. Cause I think of Shamari Stone the second as being a more fast type guy at there in the defensive back room. That kind of showed you that the length, the speed, all of that. I definitely think.
Yeah.
But
and that's where there's value for guys like that. Sorry, cut you off.
That's all good. Let's continue this on the other end. We've got plenty more to talk about when it comes to the Michigan spring game. So we'll get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, there's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment that Jalen Brunson flops onto the ground for no given reason is huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets. Even when the demand is sky high, prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can even save you up to 60%. Save up to 60% buying those last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Jake, let's talk about tight ends for the rest of the time. No, that's your dream. That's your dream scenario. I feel like I would have been a tight end. I'm not nearly as tall as you, but if I would have played like, 6'1", I think I was probably more 6'2" before slouching kind of reformed my body with age. I think though, like I would have been one of those blocking tight ends, right? So we should do a show, Oops All Tight Ends, at some point to go along with our other nickname.
Yeah.
It's very popular when we don't mention it and unpopular when we do. So, all right, let's, I want to get into Bryce Underwood. Obviously, upon my rewatch, I saw a guy that I felt, I don't want to steal Steve Dace's thunder. He's going to come on the show, I think tomorrow. I'll find out hopefully tonight if that's going to happen. But he was talking about how he didn't just see a guy out there just throwing. He saw a quarterback. And that he was doing things that we haven't really seen outside of really senior year JJ McCarthy. We don't really get to, junior year JJ McCarthy. We don't really get to see very often. A guy stepping up in the pocket, going through his progressions, all of that. Only 12 of 26, but what was your takeaway when it came to Bryce?
I know exactly what he's saying when he says that, and I think that that's a great way to put it, because you saw just at its foundational level, like you saw footwork and timing, you saw pitch throw when that's what the play called for. You saw accuracy for the most part in a few drops. you saw ball placement. I think that's an important distinction too, is there was a few near misses or drops, which weren't just thrown to the right guy, but the ball placement was perfect. Even on his misses, I think good quarterbacks know where to miss and where to leave the ball. They're not just throwing the ball to a guy. You just saw that elite arm talent, and the ball just jumps off his hands. Like, just even comparing the two quarterbacks with Jaden Davis, like when Jaden Davis was throwing from hitch to the wide field, the zip wasn't near what it was when Bryce Underwood was throwing from the hash to the wide field. So even when he stepped up in the pocket, there was one play where he stepped up in the pocket and scrambled all the way to the left sideline. And that's a level of athleticism, particularly for a guy of his size, that is extremely, extremely rare. So there's a ton to be excited for. I felt bad because it stinks when we knew he was going to be judged against the label of 8-figure recruit, highest rated recruit in Michigan history. And yet, let's just put it into context once again of everything around him. So that's what was frustrating for me. But for those that really watched and understand the context, holy cow, the talent that he has is extremely exciting.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I felt like I saw way more drops watching it on film than seeing it in person. It was just like, oh, another incompletion, right? And watching the broadcast, it was like, yep, he threw that to only where that guy could get it, and that guy should have gotten it. Think of the throw to Joe Taylor in the end zone, which was very JJ McCarthy Jr. year. You think of either of those throws to Jamar Browder that I felt like Browder mistimed his jump on both of them. There's the drop by Fred Moore. I mean, there's just so many that you could look at and say, like, I mean, I just mentioned 4. You could be talking 16 of 26 and be feeling a little bit better. Honestly, there was probably about 4 more there,
Yeah.
So,
Isaiah, another thing too is some guys, when they throw, some guys throw it hard just to like kind of, because that's all they have. They like, it's almost like it's hard to describe, but some guys, when they go to their fastball, it's like a dead rock that's coming 100 miles an hour at you. It becomes very hard to catch. Bryce, when he throws it hard, I don't know if you feel what I'm saying here, but it has a beautiful tempo to it where it still seems easy to catch. I know the guy's dropped it, but I don't get that same feeling. I see a tight spiral that's cutting through the air, and again, with great ball placement, it's just so effortless when he throws the ball. And even, again, there was one throw where it was a stop route, like a 10-yard stop out to his left once again, timing play. And he got to the end of his drop, one hitch, and released it. That ball is supposed to be, it's coached. That ball should be on the outside shoulder away from the defense. That ball was like a Olympian archer to the outside shoulder, in rhythm and on time. And like, those are little things that you can extrapolate and say, oh, this kid really does get it. He understands what quarterback play is all about. So little things like that got me, really excited.
With that in mind, I can't help but be a little concerned about the wide receivers. Now, granted, the majority of who we saw were not the 3 guys that we expect at this juncture to be the starters. And just to name them, Donovan McCulley, new number 1, Samaj Morgan, and Frederick Moore. It was more of those other guys. You talked about maybe some of the tight ends having an involvement, but we didn't see Hogan Hansen. Right. Marlon Klein, I don't really even recall seeing him out there. I saw him in uniform, but that's it. So with the kind of, caveat that maybe we didn't really get a chance to see much of those guys that are going to be catching the ball from him, it did concern me to see the amount of drops, the amount of guys not making plays. Did you have concerns about the wide receivers, and especially kind of the lack of separation at the top of their routes?
Yes. Now, again, like, you have to put this in context. Like, Michigan is not going to turn around their wide receiver room, but Donovan McCulley is a talent that they didn't even have last year. Like, Donovan McCulley is a talent. I know Roman got drafted high and Cornelius was a stud, but McCulley's a different level of physical talent and capability. So there was also what's concerning, the missed assignments too, where they're not on the same page and it looks like guys are running the wrong routes, or it looks like guys aren't on the same page with their quarterbacks. That part's concerning because you just went through spring ball. That shouldn't be the case. There is fixable pieces of this, which is I think Jamar Broder ran a double move, or maybe it was a go ball, and he beat the corner right away. If he accelerated and kept running at full speed, that should be a touchdown. But as soon as he beat the corner, he kind of went into cruise control and slowed it down. And that's something that showed up a few times. And I think I credit that more to just youth. You can get away with that when you're a physical freak in high school. But in college and in the pros, you have to sprint every single inch of your route. And I remember when Jed Fish first got to Ann Arbor, he would play us film of NFL wide receivers. And when you watch those guys run, it's a track meet for every inch of their routes. And I just think those are things that need to be emphasized this summer. I love what you shared with me about Eric Soup Campbell, the wide receiver coach, which is bringing in a veteran voice, and he's putting up posters of the great Michigan wide receivers from the early 2000s and saying, guys, like, don't forget, because Michigan's labeled a run first team, that we haven't had amazing wide receiver play in our history, and quizzing them on those guys, because I think it's important that room understands that there is a standard beyond what was shown last year, and they need to work this summer to try to meet that, because there's physical gifts. I think Michigan will continue to recruit and bring in bodies to that room, but they have got to work and elevate to bring this thing all the way home for the offense as a whole.
Now, before we're going to move on, but I do want to bring up one point before we go to break. One of the things that's like a couple of those throws were from Bryce looked like overthrows, but to me, it's kind of like exactly what you said. That guy keeps running. That's not an overthrow. He's running to where the guy should be instead of where the guy ended up. It felt like there were 2, if not 3 or 4 of those plays throughout. They've got to pick that up. I agree. All right, we'll finish out on defense, and we're going to do that here in just a moment. But before we do, the NBA playoffs are here, as evidenced by Jalen Brunson laying on the ground, calling for a foul, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props, from 3-pointers to steals to assists, but unfortunately not over-unders on Jalen Brunson flops. FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, Jake, as you listen to me include Jalen Brunson in all of my ad reads, listen, as someone who's been a Pistons fan, like a diehard Pistons fan for like the last 21 hours, I can't stand it. I can't stand watching Brunson flop. I can't do it. I mean, but
my in-law, Natalie's family's from the East Coast, and they're all Knicks fans, and I'm in a group chat with them, and I like to go back and forth with them. I'll give them credit. At least, they're in their group chat, they were calling out Jalen Brunson a little bit for his foul baiting, which is just ridiculous, and it's out of control. Like, just go play hoops. Just go play hoops. Come on, enough of the foul baiting.
It's pretty ridiculous. As someone who, like, my favorite teams, my all-time favorite teams that I have followed, your team, 2016 Michigan, 2023 Michigan for obvious reasons. But it's hard for me to beat 2003 through 4 Detroit Pistons. I was all in, watched probably, 95% of the games that year. So to watch like someone like, if he did that against like the going to work Pistons, like, or the bad boys, like, that just wasn't gonna, it was crazy to me to see.
My favorite part of that early 2000s Pistons team, which I love watching them too. And Tayshaun Prince was my brother Zach. It was his favorite player, but it was the pregame announcer, the Chauncey Billups, Ben Wallace. You know what I'm saying? That got me so hyped up.
That was like the change of everything, because I had taken off the 90s watching basketball because I was more of a music guy, and music and sports couldn't coexist in the 1990s. And then 2002, I'm like, I'm gonna start watching the Pistons again. You know, like I know they've got some new guys, and they got a new coach, Rick Carlisle, or he's in his second year now or whatever. And yeah, it was just like that was part of the change, bringing in Mason and just like the Detroit hype. It was an awesome team to follow for almost a whole decade. Let's get back to football, because we're running low on some of the time here, and I don't want to keep that one. But defensively, I felt like normally in a spring game you can't necessarily glean too much outside of individuals, but I felt like defensively, I just came away being like that might be the best. Like, it's just so deep. There's so many players that can make plays. Who really impressed you, and what, you know, and do you agree with my sentiment? I should ask, because you could be like, I walked away thinking this is 2016 Rutgers. Everyone's going to drop 78 on us. But what is your takeaway from the defense and players that maybe?
Same thing. And that's the hard thing about spring ball is, you know, everyone wants to see this exciting offense, but let's tone it down and remember the defense that they're going against. So that the D-line, though, that promise and those words were fulfilled. That D-line is stout. They're deep. We didn't even get to see them at their best in terms of some of their blitz packages. I think the linebacker room, the excitement is certainly warranted there. I'm excited to see Jimmy Rolder in an increased role with increased reps. And then I think the secondary, I think Rod Moore's health is going to unlock a lot for this defense, because the nickelback position is kind of up for grabs right now. And if you have Rod Moore and then Brandon Hillman as your starting safety, all of a sudden you can start to, maybe it's, you know, one of the Metcalves out there, Mason Curtis, that gets to play that nickelback position, or you can flow some of those guys through there. I think that's going to be the key. But what you saw was, you know, everything to be excited about for, you know, Michigan's defense. And I mentioned Lowe as the guy that stood out in the secondary. He just had a phenomenal game and was constantly in position. I think, you know, he's earned himself a chance to start camp in that 2D.
Yeah, I'd like to add Shamari Earls, who felt very locked down.
Shamari Earls.
Again, the caveat, who's he really going up against? He was going up against Peyton O'Leary a bit, but Peyton O'Leary's an older guy. He should, you know, he knows what it takes to go out there. He's played against Ohio State and came down with a big catch against the Buckeyes when counted. So the fact that he was pretty much locked down on Peyton O'Leary, I think, is. Last question for you. Do you feel better or worse now based off of seeing this about Michigan's chances to do something this season?
You know what? I think I feel right. I felt better preparing for the games. You know, once I heard the whispers and once I heard about the offensive line, that's kind of what set my expectations. And I looked at the schedule and said, okay, they could do something. So the spring game didn't really change, you know, my emotion. But again, I do believe that wide receiver group, those 50-50 balls, I want to say, it really might have been only the one by McCauley that the offense won. That they're going to have to win 50% of those come the season. They are going to have to win, because you have a quarterback that's going to give you a chance and put the ball where you have a chance to make those plays. Michigan has to have some type of downfield passing attack. That's just the glaring need for them to evolve as a team. The defense is going to keep them in every game. The offensive line has taken a stride. I don't know that they're going to win the Joe Moore Award this year. I don't know if I believe that. The running back room is championship level. I'm excited about the tight ends. But that wide receiver room has to take a stride, and they have to actually win at least 50% of those 50.
It's kind of funny because it feels like Ohio State and Michigan are polar negatives of each other, right? You got
Yes.
Ohio State's got all the wide receivers in the world, really could use a defensive line. They went and got Bo Atkinson, who is like, okay, man, that guy, that he can play. And Michigan has no wide receivers that we know of, but we went out and got Donovan McCulley and says, okay, he can play. They're built completely different. It's wild. All right, Jake, that's going to do it for us today. Again, that's Mackey Award winning tight end, Big Ten Network color commentator, the premier one over there, and soon to be taking over all of your sports airwaves, I believe. Jake Butt, thanks for joining us. We will be back hopefully with 2 episodes on Thursday, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.